I got to do that. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So last summer, John Acuff wrote the very first personal development book I ever read. It was the book that I was reading 6 months postpartum with my daughter when I was overweight and wanted to lose weight. It was the book I was reading when COVID hit and I was managing a dementia facility and lost all control of everything. The book is called Finish, again by John Acuff. It had nothing to do with, the things that I needed help with, but it was reading a book that kind of spoke to my heart. It made me laugh. It was an easy read. And that's what I hope my book is for people. Just to throw a side note in there, I wanted to create a book that could be that catalyst for people, like books like Finish or for me. So last summer, I got an opportunity to hear John speak, and there was an opportunity for a $50 VIP luncheon with him where you could go and ask all the questions. I chose the bigger life. I spent the $50. I went and I sat less than 30 feet away from my favorite author, got a picture with him and all the things. And a lot of what I asked him about, because I asked multiple questions, I'm aggressively friendly in that way. The questions that I asked him were, how do you stay consistent in a world where so many people are not trying? How do you keep that mentality and that mindset when you're spending time with people who don't seem to be trying as hard as you? It doesn't mean they're not trying as hard as you. You just don't get to see the internal, things that they're going through. And he essentially said, stay in your own lane, do what you have to do to live the life that you want to lead. And that's where the title of my book came from, How to Choose the Life You Want to Lead.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an author on the podcast, brand new book, brand new in the world for us to all to enjoy and to share with our friends and family. Desiree's here. She's been on my How to Podcast series. She's a great podcaster as well. So if you haven't had enough, you could read her book while listening to her podcast. You could do both. That would be like super great. You could do both. Desiree's here. Desiree, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm excited. I'm working on an audiobook too. So maybe one day you could do a little bit of both and listen to the book.
Listen to the book while reading the book and listening to the podcast at the same time. We could do all three. It's great. Desiree, tell everybody about your podcast, first of all. Let us know about that.
Absolutely. So my podcast is called Lead with Confidence. It is an understanding of what it takes to be the best version of yourself, knowing that that comes with some of the negative feelings and the positive feelings in a growth mindset. So it comes in on a personal basis as well as a professional basis. And we just talk about all the things with pretty fantastic people. I absolutely love the process.
Good. Is there a starting point for a new listener? Where should they go in your podcast?
Episode 1. I'm officially 50 episodes in, and starting from number 1 is going to give you a really good understanding of who I am. And it's pretty fun to see the evolution that just 50 podcast episodes can bring to a podcast host. So
nice. That's good. Yeah. And I listen at work. You keep me company. So you are in my head as I'm doing my job. So it's kind of nice. It's, again, for people who haven't met their favorite podcaster yet, it's kind of surreal to hear your voice coming out of your face when it's something I hear in my ears all the time. It's kind of like mentally doing the math in my head, like, wow, it's really her. So it's kind of nice to hear that. So yeah, thank you for keeping me company at work. It's great.
Absolutely. I listen back to my own podcast, but I cannot listen to anything on normal speed. I have to listen to everything at least 1.5 to 2 times speed. So I hear myself talking. I'm like, God, do I really sound like that? And I'm like, okay, no, I'm sped up. Like, it's fine. I don't normally talk this fast.
Yeah, I almost get like chipmunk speed. I heard some people like listen at 2.5. I'm like, and then they speed up their movies on Netflix. And I'm like,
I couldn't do that.
I feel like it's like running downhill. That to me, that's what it feels like. You're just like, oh my gosh, I'm going too fast. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I'm a 1X person. I love connecting with the host and hearing them in their normal cadence. Because if I see them on stage someday, I'm not expecting them to be talking 2X up on stage. I'm expecting them to be themselves, right? And so anyway, that's kind of that's why I'm an old guy, though. That's how I do it.
No, you're right. Because when I'm in person with people and at meetings and things, I'm like, okay, let's speed this process along. Like, let's talk a little bit faster. I've definitely conditioned myself to be slightly impatient.
Hmm.
But I get so distracted so easily when listening to something that if I don't speed it up, it doesn't hold my attention.
Good.
So I try not to speed it up too fast because then when I'm in person with people, I really struggle. My husband tries to tell me stories of things that he heard on the radio, and I'm sitting there leaning forward like, hey, I'm ready. Like, what happened next? Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's pros and cons to speeding up the things you listen to.
So the one thing we can't speed up is reading your book. Tell us about your new book.
It was a labor of love. I'm sure every author can say that, but this book really was not on my timeline of things that I wanted to do. I started a leadership development company, and I absolutely love hosting workshops for companies, working within teams. But one thing that I truly believe is that in order for teams to connect with one another, they have to further individualize themselves. They have to know themselves better. They have to be working on their own personal and professional development. And I was not seeing that enough in the individuals on a team, which was making team engagement really difficult. And so I was like, what could I do to make my job easier, but also add a lot of value to the individuals in the room? And I happened to come across a book coach on LinkedIn. I knew that I didn't have the accountability to self-publish. I'm just not one of those people. And so I didn't have to write a proposal or anything like that. I pitched it to this publisher who also happened to be a book coach. And she's like, yeah, let's make a book. So I wrote this book about 6 to 8 months after my mom passed away. And I wrote about the process of creating a life you love. I essentially deconstructed my life up until that point and said, I built a life that I absolutely loved. I managed a dementia facility through COVID. I lost my mom just 2 months after my second kid was born. Like, I had gone through all these very traumatic things, and yet I was still finding joy and laughter and appreciation and gratitude. And I said, why? What did I do that was different than the people around me who are not still moving, that are not still living their lives and enjoying their lives? And so I deconstructed that whole process and created a framework for people that works really well, both at home and in the workplace. Because I don't believe that you have to try and balance the two, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. I heard that on a recent episode of your podcast, and I'm like, it's interesting because I've actually you talk about harmony not being the thing that you lean to when you try to balance work and life. And I was interesting because I had been kind of thinking one way and you challenged me to think another way. Let's talk a little bit about that because it really caught my attention listening to that. And we'll put a link to that episode in particular to go listen to, but and unpack that for us a little bit, because I think that we get caught in this world of demands on our time. And the way I was thinking about it was, when you're at work, you need to be at work. Otherwise, they're going to let you go because you're not doing the job. And they hired you to do a job, and you can't be on your phone talking to the kids and, talking to your spouse. You have to do the thing. That's why you were hired. And then when you're at home, when my phone rings and it's my boss, I don't even want to know that they're calling me. So I want to try to create some space in my two worlds where they don't interact with each other. I want that. To me, that seems like harmony, but you challenging that a little bit. Talk about that.
So first off, this concept of work-life balance, if you think of the word balance, it's creating equal amounts of time or energy or whatever it might be, effort, into two separate things and trying to get them to equal out. And that might have worked, 50, 100 years ago when men went to work, women stayed home. Men knew, I'm going to work at this time, I'm leaving at this time, whether they're in a factory or whatever it might be. And they didn't have to think about work when they came home. Balance in that sense might have worked. And I think that's where this concept of balance started from. Mm-hmm. Over the last 20 years, people have been like, that's not what it is anymore. It's harmony. We have to create harmony. We have to be, happy about the unbalance of work and life. And we have to try and figure out a way to just be okay with it and be happy with it. But we all know it's not butterflies and rainbows all the time. There's going to be work projects that are going to take your time and energy, and that's going to have to be your priority for the day or the week, whatever it might be. And there's going to be times when you have a sick kid or you're doing things at home that are going to require more of your time and energy. You got little kids, that's going to take more of your time and energy than when they're grown adults.
Right.
There is not this balance. And in my opinion, harmony is just not the right word. Again, everyone has their own definition for it. So if harmony is how you want to look at it, Dave, I highly encourage you to roll with it. But for me, it's integration. We're a world of entrepreneurs now. We are a world of people who want to live their best moments at home. That's the mindset around it. And I was recently working with this 21-year-old who was a young engineer, just graduated college, already, I say complaining, but he was just telling me, and he said, I want to have the best moments of my day at home, and I don't want to have to think about work. And I don't really want to go to work on Mondays. And I'm like, you are way too young to already be frustrated by the work world because you're going to be in it for a while. So it's like, we have to figure out how you can enjoy your job to the point where you can come home and tell your friends or your spouse about the good things that happened. And we need to be able to go to work and tell our coworkers about the cute thing our kids did, or, the crazy thing your wife said, or whatever it might be. There has to be integration of the two. And where those two things come to meet is you. They come to meet at your a willingness and ability to grow as a human, to become a better version of yourself, to, grow in your communication skills and your emotional intelligence, which is what my podcast is about. It's how can you grow to be a better human, both professionally and personally, so that you can show up as the best version of yourself with 100% energy, 100% effort, and 100% of yourself at work and at home. Never, yes, I agree with you though. You want to be able to kind of leave work at work and not have to think about it all the time. But if you enjoy your job and you're able to think happy thoughts, why wouldn't you want to take some of that joy home with you?
Good.
And vice versa?
Good. I like that. Yeah. So it's all about taking intentional action, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I could sit on my soapbox with that for so long. And again, it's not the words that you choose: balance, harmony, integration. It's your understanding of how you define whatever word you pick.
So in the process of writing your book, how did you change as an author, as a person?
Well, I started writing my book through this lens of discernment. In other words, I was trying to be everything for everyone. I wanted anyone who read my book to find something. I didn't want to piss anybody off, for lack of a better term. I just wanted to be kind of even keeled, go with the flow, and tell my story without anyone getting mad about it, because I knew that there would be people who would be mad about the story, even if it wasn't negative, even if it wasn't about them, there were going to be people that were mad. So I actually was almost completely finished writing all 9 chapters. And I went back to reread the first chapter, and I read it, and I didn't sit well with me. I reread the second chapter, and I'm like, God, this isn't my voice. It's not the same writer. It's not the same book as the last chapter that I had just finished. And same thing with the third chapter. And I ended up literally throwing those 3 chapters away and rewriting them in my voice, just knowing that there were going to be people, one person specifically, who wasn't going to like it. And I needed to be okay with that. If I was going to help people and add value to people in the way that I wanted to, I needed to tell my story in my voice with my sarcasm and my vulnerability. And that was the way that it had to be. Honestly, writing this book broke me out of this shell of people pleasing that I don't even know that I realized I was in.
Were those first 3 chapters people pleasing chapters then?
The message stayed the same.
Okay.
The way that I wrote it came out of that people pleasing. Again, it wasn't that I was trying to butter anyone up. The wording didn't necessarily change, but I'm a very direct, aggressively friendly,
Aggressively friendly. I love that.
Yes. Human. Yeah. And I'm sarcastic, and I like to put things in parentheses with jokes behind them. And I wasn't doing any of that in those chapters. And so, there was a lot of changes that happened, and mostly they were internal, just a willingness to kind of find my voice. I find that with podcasting just as much. If you hold back, it's going to be a really boring episode. So you kind of just have to lay it out there the way that it is. And someone doesn't like the message, they won't listen to the podcast. There's something out there for everyone.
There's a lot of vanilla ice cream podcasts and books and content in the world where people are afraid to be themselves. Right?
You will not find that in my book.
There you go. No vanilla ice cream, some sprinkles and a lot of other stuff, but not vanilla. Okay, that's good. So what is a reader going to find when they open the book for the first time? What's your love letter to them before they read a single word?
So I start the book by saying the hardest thing I've ever had to do is live in a world without my mom.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of people in the world who've lost people. There's a lot of people in the world who've been fired or had to work on the front lines during COVID, or all of these different things that I experienced that up until the middle of 2022, I could have never claimed. It all happened in such a short amount of time. And essentially, in my introduction, you'll see that we are not alone in any of the things that we go through, even if they don't look the same as the person standing next to us. The feelings of vulnerability are there. And as long as we're willing to create space for ourselves and for other people to join in on that, there can be a lot of change and a lot of camaraderie that can happen around those things. They don't have to be hidden.
You walk into the room, you sit down with your mom and you say, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to write a book." What's her response?
I have no idea.
Mm.
To be completely honest with you, I've had so many people that have said, your mom would be so proud of you. And I hope that's true. She was not someone who, she was someone who went to work, absolutely loved her job with every fiber of her being, did everything that was asked of her. She'd work in the evenings and, on the weekends, and that was her. It wasn't really get out of your comfort zone, go down the unbeaten path. And I'm very much so taking the road less traveled.
Mm.
So I've thought about that question a lot, Dave. What would mom say? And there's a chapter in the book where I tell about her story, because my sisters actually blame my mom's stroke on her work and the amount of time and energy and stress and all of the things that went into it. And I don't agree. And so I told that story originally through this lens that I saw it through. And I sent it to my mom's best friend, who actually happened to work in the same place. And I said, can you read this? Can you tell me, am I too far off base? Like, is it too honest? Is it, what is it? And she sent it back to me with some revisions. I changed what she requested and I sent it back. And she said, this is the message that people need to hear. This is the catalyst that will help people change. And she said, I felt like your mom was back for a little bit. She's like, I felt a piece of her in the story that you wrote. And she said, you needed to write the really emotional version to get it off your chest. And she said, I needed to read the really emotional version. But she said, that's not the story that everyone else needs to hear. So I tried to be really cognizant of the fact that my mom's not here and I couldn't ask her permission, but still telling her story in a way that could affect change for a lot of people. So I hope she'd be proud.
Good. What is intentional inaction in comparison to your book?
Well, can I read to you a little bit of the back of the book?
Oh, yeah. I love when authors read their book. Come on.
So if you were to pick up my book and read the back of it, it says this: we all have good intentions to eat healthier, exercise, read more, and scroll less, to have better relationships with our spouses, children, friends, and coworkers, to live a life that we are proud of and that we love to live. Unfortunately, most of our daily actions feel urgent rather than intentional. We can't keep our head above water. We struggle to get ahead, and we're always waiting for things to slow down. That is when our good intentions are overshadowed by excuses and circumstances that are out of our control. But fortunately, our busy lives are not mutually exclusive from living lives of purpose and living out our passions. So inaction is what I think most of us would describe our lives as. Sitting in front of the TV and not doing the things that excite us and not fostering the relationships that we ultimately want to foster, but maybe we don't know how to go about it. Action is one thing. Action, taking a step forward, is great. But if you're not stepping in the direction of your ultimate goal, you might end up too far in the wrong direction and not know how to backtrack. Intentions are great. We all have good intentions. But if we don't take action on them, they're not going to come to fruition is to what we want. We have to take intentional action, mix the two together, choose the trajectory of the life that we want. We can never say, this is what I want 5 years from now. This is what I'm going to get. And here's how I'm going to get there. There's too many unknowns that we don't have control over. but we can set the trajectory. We can course correct. We can take the right steps and go towards the thing that we want. And that's what intentional action is. Inaction is opposite. It's
Yeah.
not moving.
Disengaged, not
Yes.
moving forward, not moving anyway. In podcasting, we try to pick our ideal listener for our show so we know who we're talking to. So we can kind of frame our reference, our guests, our content towards a certain listener for our podcast. As an author, how do you take that same practice and apply it to a book? Who's your intended reader for this book?
Love that question, because they always say you need to write to and speak to and teach to the person that you once were. And back in 2017, when I had just gotten married and I went in for an interview to become the assistant to the director of nursing for a dementia facility and walked out with a leadership position, a management position, I had no idea what I was doing. I wish someone would have had the podcast that I have now created. I wish someone would have handed me my book. That's the message that I wrote. If I, as in 2017, was going to read a book, these are the messages that I would want to hear. There is the framework in there. And I love that you use the word disengagement, because the bottom tier of my framework is self-engagement. It's the habits that we create that can really help us to build a solid foundation of self. And the book's message, chapter 6, is called Walking into the Wind. It's being comfortable with being uncomfortable, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the more that we're willing to test our mindset, the more we're willing to test our physical body and all these things, the more prepared we will be when there's something on the line.
How did that management position take you off the rails? What happened?
Well, I was not prepared. I had a management degree in college, or graduated from college with a management degree, and just assumed that someone would give me a job, which it turns out they did. I was not prepared. I did not have the emotional or social intelligence to lead a group of people. I had been in healthcare 10 years. I had that kind of experience, but it's a whole different ballgame going from direct care with the people you're taking care of to then managing the people who are providing the direct care. And that was the piece I didn't know. I was micromanaging. I was terrified that people were going to find out that I didn't know what I was doing. Ultimately, it was just this fear was holding me so tight. I couldn't step out of any of it. The daily fires that were happening that had nothing to do with me, I was going in and trying to put them out. I was trying to micromanage, my employees who had been working there for 20 years. I had no business trying to micromanage them. And so I went to my boss one day and he gave me the advice. He said, get out of the building, go create some relationships. In management, sometimes you have to be the big picture thinker. And when you are so in the throes of the fire, you don't have an opportunity. You're not giving yourself enough space. So I went and joined the Chamber of Commerce. I went and joined different boards for the elderly, for dementia specific. I did a lot of different things that helped me to kind of get out of that micromanaging mindset and enter into this world of community and relationships and networking and collaboration that I didn't get elsewhere. And that was the start of my journey into personal development.
So that young management position person feeling overwhelmed, underqualified in the moment, thinking they had all the tools, but they don't. They're sitting in the front seat of their car today listening to this. They're going to go buy your book, obviously, but they're like, I'm going to go check out your podcast. But they identify with what you just said, and no one's ever said it the way you just said it. What do you want to say to that person listening right now, who's just us, the three of us here in the room together? What do you want them to know? How do they get past where they are, and what's ahead for them?
The word confidence comes with so much expectation. And to feel confident, I think people think that there is this tipping point where all of a sudden something's going to happen and you're going to feel confident. And I've come to realize that that's 100% not the case. Confidence, just like happiness and motivation and all these things, it's going to come and go. It's going to feel really low at some points and really high at some points, but there is a way to create confidence. And it's a framework that I talk about in my book, but it's as easy as ABC. So you have to ask yourself these 3 questions. what do I need to acquire? What skills do I need to acquire? What relationships do I need to acquire? What do you need to actively do, actively seek in order for you to start to close the gap between where you are right now and where you want to be? That's all it takes, is that very first question of what do I need to acquire? B is, do I believe I can acquire it? Confidence is just this manifestation of the fact that you know that no matter the situation you are in, you have the skills and the mindset to overcome any challenge. But you do truly have to believe that you are capable of it. And that's that self-worth piece of my framework, is that you have to believe that no matter the situation, you can overcome any hardship. And C is consistency. What skills do you need to acquire? Do you believe that you can do it? And how are you going to create consistency in your life so that it becomes a habit? It becomes part of your lifestyle. And it's not just this thing that you're constantly fighting against. And this is whether it's nutrition or career growth or exercise or being a good parent, a good friend, a good spouse. That consistency is that piece that kind of locks it in, even in moments of hard times, even in moments when you're questioning your qualifications, even in moments when things feel really hard. You've created that habit, that consistency, and that self-worth and self-awareness behind the things that you want. You don't have to question whether you're capable. You'll know it.
What does it feel like when the book arrives at your house for the first time?
Funny enough, so many people got my book prior to me getting it. I had ordered a box of 100 of them, and I ordered them directly from the warehouse. So I was getting pictures from all my friends who ordered it on Amazon and had it weeks before I did. So I had seen a physical copy of the book in pictures, but I hadn't held it myself. And then all of a sudden I got this box and it didn't look anything like I thought it was going to be. It was bigger than I thought. It's very yellow, which is my favorite color. So that was intentional, but I was like, it's very yellow. It was just this overwhelming feeling of like, I did this. It is in the world. I can't take it back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a forever thing now.
Right.
And there was just something about my life up until the age of 30 is now on paper. No one can take that away. That is there for my kids. My mom died really young, and I would do anything for her to have written a book. And I just said, it's now there. It's there for them when they want it.
It's a big moment. Like, that's, I think, when I talk to authors, sometimes they don't, I ask them, like, how did you celebrate? They're like, you know what? I haven't yet. I haven't celebrated the launch of my book because I've been so busy doing the thing, right? I'm getting out, talking about it, promoting it, making sure everything, like, you're micromanaging your book launch. I'm like, well, when did you celebrate? Like, when did you like, take a big breath and go, I did it, like, yay. And you run around and, scream or something. I don't know. And people are like, you know what? I haven't done that yet. I'm like, well, maybe you should. Like, that's a big thing. There's how many people have started writing a book and have never finished, right? And here you are with it in your hand. Like, that's a big thing. So, hey, congratulations. Like, wow. Like, that's amazing. So I think as authors are in that long, arduous task of writing a book, they dream for the day that they're going to hold the book. And then when they get it, they're thinking about the next book. But I just think you need to celebrate the fact that you did this first big thing before you jump to the next big thing. That's all.
I struggled to celebrate. The day that I got my book, I was headed to my sister's graduation party, and I didn't want to make it about me. So I was really excited. I saw the book. I held it in my hands. I put a couple copies in the backseat of my car so that if anyone were to ask me about it, I had them. And the one person that I knew would not be happy for me, regardless of the whole book, was to praise her, wasn't happy for me and ended up not taking it very well. And so this is my reminder to anyone. Dave just reminded me, and I'm going to turn it back and remind anyone here who has done anything that feels hard. You will never make everybody happy. Right. There's always going to be that one, potentially more than one person. And it's taken me a long time to kind of just let that weight fall off my shoulders. But the second you do, it feels so good. And that's ultimately when I celebrated my book. It was like, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it felt so good to just let that weight release and finally take that big, deep breath and say, I wrote a book and I don't care who isn't happy about it. I'm happy about it. And that felt huge.
For the listener that has never really focused on intention in their life, what's one thing we can do this week to identify intention and work our way towards a goal this week? What can we do? A practical thing we can do?
Gretchen Rubin is one of my favorite authors. Her book, The Happiness Project, brought me to her podcast, the Happier Podcast. And the question she always asks is, how are you going to choose the bigger life? Is this thing going to choose the bigger life? So for anyone listening, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn creating content there. Yep. And today, the podcast or the piece that I posted was, have you ever stood in the grocery store and stared at a $5 item that just made you smile and you knew you wanted it, but you knew that it probably wasn't necessary, and you end up walking away and you just wish that you would have had that flamingo welcome sign that hung in your front yard, and every time you drive up your driveway, it just makes you smile. Buy the thing. Buy the $5 item. Choose the bigger life. And I think sometimes we're so conditioned to join the hustle culture. We're so conditioned to be searching so hard for work-life balance that we're missing things that are happening around us. We're so determined to make things perfect that we're missing the little pieces, the imperfections that actually make life fun. So my advice to you today to be intentional is figure out what makes you smile, what brings you a little bit of joy, and buy the thing, do the thing, have the conversation, go on the date. Just be really intentional about making sure that you're choosing the life you want to lead.
And maybe stop playing small.
Oh, I say that all the time.
Right.
I said the second my mom passed away, I asked myself, why are you playing so small? It doesn't make any sense. Life is short. It's not promised to anyone. And it was less than 6 months later, I decided to start my company.
There you go. It's like, who are you to write a book, Desiree? Why are you trying to play big? Just play small. Just fit in with the crowd and let us all be a bunch of small players. You stood up and went, wait a minute. No, I got something to say. I'm going to create a podcast. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do the thing. And that's what makes you stand out. And that's what we need, is more people to use your voice and stand out and share your message so that other people can be helped in the process.
Well, and I have to say, I live in a small town in southwestern Minnesota. There are very few people who do what I do, who have the goals that I have. Not that in a corporate setting, they don't have big goals. That's amazing. But I'm like constantly questioning myself. Who am I, a small town girl from Minnesota wanting to do big time things? Who am I? And there is a world online. It seems so strange, but Dave, I would have never met you if not trying to choose the bigger life and getting on LinkedIn and, joining Facebook groups and all of these different things. I went to Arizona and met some of my best friends ever, people I had never met in person, because I joined a mastermind to try and be a better version of myself. There is a whole world out there. You do not have to play small. There are so many people right now that are going to help you to choose the bigger life. You just have to be intentional about finding them.
And whether it be a book or a podcast or content, whatever it is, just putting yourselves out there. Again, you keep me company at work. It's amazing to have somebody that you respect who shows up on a regular basis. They're consistent and has great content in the world that keeps people company, encourages people, like you're doing for me through your podcast and now your book. It's just amazing that we have this opportunity and a platform now as content creators, whatever that is for you, that you can share your message with the world in a way that if you live in a small town or a big city, you can still have a big impact. So reach out, share. You have something to say that no one else can say.
And I speak a lot about this in the corporate setting specifically. It's okay to be a little bit vulnerable. It is okay to share a piece of yourself with people. You are strong enough to do that. You have to trust yourself first before you can trust other people with the pieces of you. But that's what's going to create real and true connection with others, is your willingness to create some space for that.
And if there's one person you're fearing might not like the content that you put into the world, and so you don't share the content, what about the 100 people that would have been helped had you shared the content? So whatever that is, don't let maybe one person or a potential thing that might seem awkward for you in the moment keep you from sharing your message, because there's people who need to hear it and they're not going to hear it anywhere else. So congratulations on stepping up and sharing that with the world.
Thank you. It's been an incredible journey, and it's only been a year. I can't even explain to you how excited I am to see what comes next.
Excellent. So the website and everything where we're going to send everybody, talk about that, talk about your podcast again, and then I have a kind of a question to wrap up our conversation. But where do we go?
Sure. Okay. So if you go to DesireePetrich.com/book, BOOK, you can find my book, Taking Intentional Action, How to Choose the Life You Lead. But I also have a freebie for anyone. I read 60 to 100 books a year. I absolutely love to read. It's mostly personal and professional development, but there's a bunch of memoirs in there. There are parenting books and Christian books and all the things. So DesireePetrich.com/books, BOOKS. You can get that list for free. It's got over 100 of my favorite books on it. My podcast is Lead with Confidence. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. Dave's guest episode is dropping today, so you can go and listen to that if you want another familiar voice on there. It was a great conversation about discipline, consistency, fun, all the things. And I really appreciate the fact that if you're listening to this, even if you don't go and take a step today, I know that you're thinking about it. You will never unhear this conversation. And so I hope the next time that you're standing in front of a $5 item at Walmart that you know will make you smile, you'll choose the bigger life.
There you go. Pink flamingos for everyone. I like that. Okay, so let's wrap up with this. You have the chance to meet one of your favorite authors. Sit down with them and ask them a question. Who's the author and what's the question?
I got to do that.
Isn't
that amazing?
Okay, yeah, go.
Last summer, John Acuff wrote the very first personal development book I ever read. It was the book that I was reading 6 months postpartum with my daughter when I was overweight and wanted to lose weight. It was the book I was reading when COVID hit and I was managing a dementia facility and lost all control of everything. The book is called Finish, again, by John Acuff. It had nothing to do with, the things that I needed help with, but it was reading a book that kind of spoke to my heart. It made me laugh. It was an easy read. And that's what I hope my book is for people. Just to throw a side note in there, I wanted to create a book that could be that catalyst for people, like books like Finish or for me. So last summer, I got an opportunity to hear John speak, and there was an opportunity for a $50 VIP luncheon with him where you could go and ask all the questions. I chose the bigger life. I spent the $50. I went and I sat less than 30 feet away from my favorite author, got a picture with him and all the things. And a lot of what I asked him about, because I asked multiple questions. I'm aggressively friendly in that way. The questions that I asked him were, how do you stay consistent in a world where so many people are not trying? How do you keep that mentality and that mindset when you're spending time with people who don't seem to be trying as hard as you? It doesn't mean they're not trying as hard as you. You just don't get to see the internal, things that they're going through. And he essentially said, stay in your own lane, do what you have to do to live the life that you want to lead. And that's where the title of my book came from, How to Choose the Life You Want to Lead.
See, it all comes back full circle. I like that. That's great. That's amazing. One day you're going to be the host as the author, and people are going to be paying $50 a plate to come sit with you and come and talk to you and ask you those same types of questions. It's going to be an interesting day when that happens. It's going to happen soon. So keep going. Keep going.
Thank you.
Excellent. Everybody, all information is always in the show notes. Go and listen to Desiree's podcast, especially the one with that crazy Dave guy. You got to go listen to that. That's an interesting conversation. But it's a great podcast. Again, Desiree, you keep me company all the time. I keep saying it over and over again, but I do love your show. I love what you put in the world. And thank you for taking the chance to put your voice out into the world. I am different because of it. I'm a listener of your show, so I'm one of your community members here with you. And I just wanted to say thank you for all the things you're doing and continue to propel you forward. I'm cheering you on so that I can be sitting in the audience that one day for $50 a plate and come and meet you in person. I can't wait for that day. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate it so much.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.